We have Professor Apoorva Patel from IISc Bengaluru, and he's going to talk on sensing with waves, classical and quantum. It's going to be a very interesting talk. So let's listen. Apoorva.
So thank you, Swapan, for inviting me to this meeting and asking me to give a talk on sensing. And I must admit that I don't really work in this particular area, but I teach the basic concepts in my class. And what I'm going to do is treat all of you as my students in the class and describe those basic concepts, hoping that something interesting or something provoking enough will come out from the discussion. So what I'm going to talk about is how do you use waves for sensing various kind of things, and what are the kind of advantages you can get from that, and how that can be included to make different kind of devices. So yeah, let me also add that there is an effort to develop quantum technology at the Indian Institute of Science, setting up a large enough collaboration, including many different topics with superconducting devices, photonics, communications, and also the theoretical support for it. And it's a collection about 40 different faculty members from probably a dozen different departments. And I am leading that particular effort. That is the way I keep in touch with all kinds of things which are going on. Okay, so now let me start at the basics. Start with sensors, which we all have. And they are both particle sensors and wave sensors. Mouth and nose work as particle sensors. They detect molecules of various different type and figure out what it is. Eyes and ears act as wave sensors, light and sound. And they also detect various things from around the world. What good are they? The important thing to realize that two wave sensors can do what a single one cannot. For example, two eyes estimates distance to the light source by parallax. We have two slightly differing images, and our brain is smart enough to combine them and figure out how much is a shift, and from that shift, decide the distance. Ears do the same thing, but in the time domain. The signals are restored a little bit different in time, and from that we judge the direction from the sound. And this is not possible with a single source. You cannot judge either the distance or the direction if you had only one eye or 1 ear. So somehow natural evolution figured it out. And we have two of the wave sensors and one of the particle sensors. Of course, the other sensor is our skin, but that is in a different class, so I will not go into that detail. So how do you extract this extra information? That you have to combine two separate signals and extract the correlation between them in some manner or the other, and that has new information. And this is the generic principle of using waves to find something which cannot be extracted at all if you do not have multiple signals coming from the same source, or the inverted situation where you have multiple sources but the same detectors. And this we have used in different ways. And the question is, can we expand that library? For example, the GPS, the Global Positioning Systems, uses both space and time separations to fix the space-time location. It does the job of both eyes and ears. And what is needed is you combine them, a very simple consideration from geometry, that in d dimension, you can cover all the points using the structure called simplex, which has d+1 points. And so GPS needs 4 satellites plus our measuring instrument to fix time and space simultaneously. So the questions which one can immediately ask now is, can we put some system of these multiple receivers on our devices which we routinely use? For example, a mobile phone. Can you put multiple sensors and make it more useful? The size of the mobile phone is not very different than the size of the separation between the 2 eyes and 2 ears. Will you be able to get anything new out of it? If you want to look at it atomic scale, you can ask whether this atomic force microscope or the scanning tunneling microscope, you put multiple sensors instead of just one tip. Can you do something more? What more you can learn about the materials and the structures that you want to study? And now this is a sort of motivation. Now let me try to be a little bit more quantitative. I'm not going to be technical at all. So this is all at a very simple, broad picture. Look at the information which you can extract from wave signals. Basically, it has 2 features. One is the intensity and another is the phase. What is contained in the intensity is essentially local and particle-like. You can measure its strength as a real number. But the new stuff which is present in waves is whatever is present in the phases. This phase information is what we play with when you look at multi-part correlations, and that is a novel feature. How has this been used? So astronomers have already explored this thing in a great detail. They use this information in the phase to improve the signal to noise ratio. The characterization is that the range of sensing should be larger than the range of the noise. So if you use large baseline interferometry, you can get rid of local disturbances. So the spatial correlations are spread out over the signals, but you bring them together and combine them in some clever manner to extract that correlation in or the information, and that will help in improving the signal to noise ratio. You also use in the time domain where you take images which have long exposures. And these long exposures are not sequences of individual shots, but you retain the phase information by taking the Fourier transform of the signal in the time domain, and that will filter out unwanted transients, which are short time scale signals. And both these features are built in to the analysis programs of what astronomers do, and they get a good advantage of the signal to noise ratio, giving us fantastic images of galaxies and star clusters and whatever larger structures of the universe there may be. But this is what is routinely done. And what is the mathematics buried inside it? It's quite simple. It is essentially described by this particular properties which electrical communication engineers use. It is called super additivity of communication channels. Essentially, it amounts to saying that if you have two copies of the same object, that state is more distinguishable than just one copy. Mind you, these two copies have to be correlated. So it has to be coming from the same source, whatever it is. And how it is more distinguishable? Well, the distinguishability is governed by state overlap. So you ask what is the state overlap? It is just a dot product. So here is cosine theta. Here, two copies will give you cosine square theta. Cosine square theta is smaller than cos theta. And so the smaller the overlap between the two states, you have higher distinguishability. And if you want to make it better and better, collect more and more copies. That's all. Nothing more complicated than that. So this is what waves can do. And I can point out something else, which is not a property of waves, but which is based on a similar idea. This is again something used by the astronomers, Hanbury-Brown twist interferometry. It doesn't use correlations in phase, but it uses correlations in intensity. And how is that useful? That comes because of another quantum property, which is identical particles. So if you have identical particles, you can still measure intensity and also include multiple paths because they will give the same final state. And the key feature is this multiple path. As long as you have that, they have extra information and that you can use for something which is of your interest. So that is a kind of generic structure of what you can get out of waves. Now let me be more oriented toward quantum mechanics, but still keeping this wave dynamics in the background. So what we know or what we learn in our first course in quantum mechanics, that whatever the dynamics is, it has both wave properties and particle properties. And they are all mixed up together. We are told that you can measure one or the other depending on your interest, and there is no problem. So how is this composite structure buried in the quantum information framework that we have developed? That the framework of definition of a quantum state involves both these labels in a different context. Waves are used to construct superposition, which means multiple signals at the same point in space and time. And that I'm calling a zero-dimensional structure. And somehow it is in an internal space. And the particle structure we use as a one-dimensional sequence, as in our language. And it doesn't have to be one-dimensional, but that is the most common structure. Higher dimensional stuff also you can construct. And the mathematical label for that structure is tensor product. We typically use it as an ordered sequence of some letters in the alphabet. And this is how quantum algorithms put together both the structures of waves and particles. And what do we get out of it? That classical algorithms will be restricted to using only the wave or the particle, but not both of them. Quantum algorithms will use both of them simultaneously. And to compare the two, it is kind of useful to figure out how much is coming from one part and how much is coming from the other part. Okay. And that is the quantification, which again can be done easily, and I'm going to describe it next. But let me also tell you that this combination, you put superposition and tensor product together, it produces a property called entanglement. The states cannot be factorized anymore once you have both of them simultaneously present. On the other hand, if you look at only one or the other, say only the wave part, what you don't require is entanglement. Coherence of the phases is sufficient. And you can extract information from that coherent signal. Okay, so now let me jump into what the particles alone can do and what the waves alone can do. So the particle property is discreteness. It essentially is stating the fact that the properties are going to be localized in space and time in some particular form. And if you use this localization in a clever way, the tensor product structure naturally leads to this possibility of factorization. And then that factorization can reduce the resource requirements, and the advantage can be even exponential. And what happened? Okay. Let me just illustrate it with various kind of examples. We use all these things routinely. So we use a digital language with a place value system, or even our written language made up of alphabet. What is it? It is a factorized process where the meaning of a number or meaning of a word is broken up into a sequence of letters. Once you put all of them together, you get the full meaning. But to write them or even talk about them, you will speak one digit or one letter at a time, and that cuts down the resources. That using, say, n digits, you can cover all the numbers from 0 to whatever, 10 raised to n. How we use it in another place is how you look up a word in a dictionary. You don't look for the whole word, you look for the first letter, then the second letter, third letter. So these are the quite common uses of how a computational task can be simplified by breaking up into smaller parts. And the behavior is actually quite generic, and that can be illustrated by just a simple explanation of what will be done in any computation. So consider any Boolean function that is all being handled by our gadgets of various digital devices. The Boolean numbers are only 0 and 1, and they have a nice property that x square equal to x. So you try writing down any function, it breaks down into a multivariate linear polynomial. Nothing more than that. Linear because x square is equal to x. No higher power can appear. And multivariate because you can have many different arguments. You ask how many different possibilities are there. So you can immediately write down this, whether it has one of the x variables, one or two, etc., etc. And you can write down that you can generate 2 raised to n possible terms by writing polynomials in n variables. And in each term, either a particular variable is there or not there. That is how a 2 raised to n number comes in. But what can happen is I want to evaluate this polynomial. What is the best you can do? That is to factorize it completely. Each factor depends on only one of the variables. And if that happens, then here there are 2 raised to n terms. I'm not going to evaluate them one by one. I will multiply these factors together. And there are n factors, and the computation will involve n additions and n multiplication. nothing more than that. The effort is order n. So how much you have gained? Well, here it was 2 raised to n, and here it is n, so you can write the maximum gain. Maximum gain because you have to know this procedure of factorization. It may work, it may not work, but that is the maximum gain achievable in a particle-like implementation. Now let me go to waves. What can you get out of it? So the characteristic property here is superposition, and which means that multiple signals are going to coexist. How can they be used? This is a label from the computer science description. It is called single instruction multiple data. That the superposition of multiple parallel threads can be all processed by a single instruction, transforming all the components in one shot. And if you are able to do that, the resource requirements again will go down, and it's very easy to see that that is an exponential gain. And again, various simple examples. We use it for communications. For example, the broadcast of all the mobile phones, everything goes out together. You will pick out what you want, but the signal which is transmitted has all of them together in superposition. So the advantage now amounts to saying how many states you can superpose. And here is a simple illustration again in the quantum information language, that you can start with a state of n zeros, rotate each one to 0 plus 1 by root 2, and write it out by brute force. What is the result? And it comes out that every sequence of 0 and 1 will appear once in the expanded structure, and there are 2 raised to n terms. They all have equal amplitude because this root 2 is a common for all of them. And so you can produce a uniform superposition of 2 raised to n components by using effort, which is n. You either rotate each n of the qubits, or you multiply all of them another effort of n. And so the advantage to produce this superposition again has a factor 2 raised to n divided by the actual computation which you did, which is n. And this is the maximum gain available in a wave-like implementation. Maximal because you are looking for some structure like this, which is uniform superposition. And the fact that this number is the same as in the particle description is something which is worth remembering, that there is as much to gain from the waves as much is there from the particles. There is a caveat which goes with the structure of superposition, and that we have to pay attention to, that when you perform a final measurement, it destroys the superposition, and only n components and n selected properties of those components can be extracted from 2 raised to n superposed components. Again, our mobile phones are a good example. All the signals are there, but your device will pick up only one signal, which it is tuned to. And one has to be clever enough to combine the superposition stuff by interference, amplification, all kind of tricks to be able to achieve that. Then you will get the maximum advantage. So now let's look at quantum algorithms. They use both of these things simultaneously. But the caveat is that the endpoints of our quantum algorithms are the same as in the classical definition on the result of the problems. We can write them down on a piece of paper. So the in-between root is quantum, but not the input and the output. What can we gain out of it? Well, we look for the best strategy, and that is possible if you can exploit both factorization and superposition maximally. It can be done in very specific problems. If you can't do it, then there has to be a trade-off. And the examples of both of these are well known. The algorithm which Peter Shor discovered for finding period of a power of a number is an example where factorization and superposition do not overlap. So you get the maximum out of both the worlds. And that has become a what you call benchmark, or not even benchmark, the leader of all quantum algorithms, and given a tremendous boost to this subject. On the other hand, there is Grover's algorithm, which is also discovered little bit afterwards. And there is a trade-off that you can get something from factorization, you can get something for superposition, and they are not independent. So you want to combine them, you don't get maximal advantage of both of them. You have to figure out what to put your emphasis on. And of course, both these algorithms have this second feature as well, that the output is concentrated in a few wave modes. Mathematically, it's a situation similar to a delta function, and that is possible in both Shor's and Grover's algorithm. And if you are not able to do that, then the success probability will go down. And the point which I want to just carry forward from this is you have to look at the problem structure. Without that, you cannot really make absolute statements. And now let me go back to the classical domain again and ask some physically relevant questions. One thing which we know already, that quantum dynamics is highly fragile against environmental disturbance, while the classical dynamics can be fairly robust. So can we consider a trade-off between these two as well? That the quantum stuff is not going to work, what should I give up and still get whatever I want reasonably efficiently? And then the answers are quite straightforward. Particle dynamics gives up superposition. That means multiple paths which may contribute, they have to be evaluated one by one, and then the total execution time will go up. If I choose to work with wave dynamics, give up the particle part of it, then I will have to work with capital N coupled oscillators instead of log 2n qubits. And that means that the space resources will go up. Remember, it's time versus space. And still, wave dynamics with coupled oscillators have many nice properties, which are all well known in classical physics, that coupled pendulums synchronize. You may have seen lights hanging from the same wire. Whether you like it or not, they all start moving together. It's very useful in designing algorithms. A simple lens performs Fourier transform. Okay, you don't need really quantum mechanics to do that. Wave optics is good enough. And these are the components which you should know how to put together if you are dealing with waves. They're not complicated, just you have to think in a little bit different directions and see where it takes you. And if I'm now looking at the trade-off, the question will come, what is more affordable between time and space? If I really can't do the quantum stuff, should I go for the particle version or the wave version? And the answer is fairly straightforward, that wave dynamics can be advantageous in situations where spatial resources are cheap, while time is highly precious. And it is in some sense a large-scale parallel computation. If you have cheap resources, you will put a lot of them together to do the same job. And this is a superposition done in a little bit different sense. And what are the examples? Such examples are very commonplace in biological systems. The cheap, redundant spatial resources are deliberately used all over the place. Just one example, seeds of a plant. One seed has to be enough to carry the next generation. Plant will produce millions of them. Why? And the biology has figured out the answer, natural evolution. What is important is a tiny advantage in time. I want to get there first. I can spend unnecessary energy by many parallel streams, but I want to reach there first. Because reaching there first is the critical success in competition, and that is what evolution is all geared for. And here you don't have to even worry about polynomial, exponential, etc. It is just a straightforward competition. And now look at what goes on in our own body, every living organism. There is a huge amount of parallel computation, no doubt about it. On top of that, all the fundamental processes in every living organisms are at the molecular scale, the metabolism. And what does it do? It does the job of sensing. Detects all kinds of signals, and based on signals carry out some particular tasks. That's it. And how much of that we have understood? Actually, not much. It goes on in our cells, whatever it is. Lots of sensing is there. Lots of processes are there. And one thing which we have known, it does not chemical reaction, but wave dynamics. The molecules vibrate, and their transients created by all those vibrations are very important part in the dynamics. We don't know what is going on, but there is a lot of stuff to learn inside there, even at molecular scale. The question is, I'm back where I started, some biological example. Can we mimic such strategies? And just like our 2 eyes and 2 ears, you don't have to ask questions about how many thousands of these I need. 2 coherent signal streams would be a good start. What extracts you can get by just putting 2 sensing devices together, but making them coherent. And well, that is a food for thought, which I want to give all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Apoorva. Thank you. Thank you, Apoorva. Great talk. I actually learned that from him. So this is why we were stressing that when we do these nano engineered quantum structures, we need to learn how to coherently create large arrays of them so you can benefit from it. Take one question maybe from the audience before we go on to Oliver. Questions? Oh, okay. Apoorva, you have done it. Great. Thank you very much.